So this piece here is the final stages, just the final finishing and evening out. And this is the very famous American fashion model, Christy Turlington, who's famous for her beautiful eyes. I was born in Zurich in Switzerland. I guess I grew up with an artistic family. My father was a very talented artist in his own way, but never had the opportunity to work as an artist. He had to take care of his family and 2 small children. But I grew up in an environment where I had it from my earliest days, and I think at some point in my teen years, in my late teens, I decided that I think I would give this a try. And I went to art school and specialized especially in fine oil painting for portrait work. I saw myself as the next great John Singer Sargent or the next great Victorian, court painter, and that's what I started. And that was basically how I began my career, which then, as the years went by, I decided to try working with other things. I mean, it looks more like a person than a rock right now, right? So this is a stage I really enjoy. How did I get started in sculpting? Well, that is a very difficult question to answer. I will tell you that a trip my wife took me was an art tour of Italy through Rome and Florence and Venice, Vatican and Museum. It was a very inspirational moment for me to change from the 2 dimensions of oil portraiture into what is a different field but very compelling field of 3-dimensional sculpture, which I think really started in that, it gestated in that trip to Italy where you see corridors and corridors of antique sculptures that from 2,000 years ago. And the record of their culture in marble was just completely hypnotizing. And I think that was the moment when I thought, I'd like to do that. I don't know if I can, but I'd like to do it. Back home, I started working with very basic materials, clay, plaster, all the beginner materials for sculpting, before I had the courage to try marble, which I eventually did. The truth is, I actually didn't think anyone really taught it, which is why I basically taught myself from scratch, which is probably why it took so long. If you're a portrait specialist in oils or whatever else, there is a basic knowledge of how the face looks and moves, and I think there's a great deal of value on the love of working with faces, which is what I do. I mean, so you take it from oil painting and you start to work with the medium of marble. Now, it is difficult because it is it's a reducing as opposed to a building. So that was the hardest thing to learn, but it took time. The reason I did not study it from somebody else was that I didn't actually know anyone who taught it. I have since found out some schools in Europe do some basic marble teaching. I think it's a school in Antwerp or in Ghent in Belgium, but they don't do portrait work. So there is some instruction in it, but it's pretty hard to find.
Christian is very passionate about his work, and he has actually destroyed a number of his pieces. If he's not satisfied with a work, he will destroy it, and he will start again. You remove the stone, and if you remove too much stone, you need to start again. So in the beginning, he did start again a couple of times because sometimes you just go too far. But he's very much dedicated to his art so that it's got to be how he feels. It has to be alive. It has to be skin. It has to be hair. He's out there in the freezing cold, and he actually almost passed out once from the sun. Actually, he did pass out once. So yeah, he is quite dedicated to his art, but it's a passion. So he's not always aware that it's hot or that it's freezing cold. I do try to get him to come in for breaks so that he's hydrated and he's looking after himself. But he's quite focused. When he's working, he's really focused.
There's a bit of a myth about artists making a living. I always say that if you take it seriously and you apply yourself, it's a great life. It's a great living. The ones who complain, I just don't think are taking it seriously enough. And at least the work that I'm doing, it is a very nice career. Because the work is pretty high price tag, but you obviously are selling to people who have that kind of money. If you figure that the piece takes between 6 months to a year to finish, depending on its size and complexity, I think if you look at one's own income, you can probably figure out how much it costs. But you're talking about 20,000 and up. That's even for a small piece.
I have been searching for quite some time to find another sculptor that does what Christian is doing. I have found sculptors who do bond marbles, the marble casts. I found those. I've found some sculptors that can cut stone, and their figures tend to be very generic, very general, beautiful figures, but they're not portraits. I have not to date found another sculptor who can carve a portrait from a block of stone. I have actually made quite an intensive effort, and I've done this because I needed some guidance with respect to the pricing of his work. So I needed something to compare. How do you price his work? Well, you look at your competition and you see what they're charging, and so you match that. And it started like that, and then I got really curious. Oh my God, this can't be true. And so then the focus changed from what do we price his work at to there must be somebody out there also doing this. And to date, I haven't found anybody, which doesn't mean they don't exist. It just means to date, I haven't found anybody.
I prefer working with women. I mean, I'm working on a bust currently of the Italian actress Monica Bellucci, who I've loved her face for years. She looks like a statue when you see her profile. But there is, we are currently working on a project of immortalizing famous Canadians in this country hopefully for national institutions. There's some senior actors and a couple of late political figures who I would like to include in this. There's some very famous singers, one of which I would like to do very much because she's absolutely stunning, is Shania Twain. We call it the Immortality Project, so it's for celebrated Canadians who everyone would know in this country and who would be ideal for public institutions, national galleries, universities, and so forth.
So does the eye have to get closer in? History is the appreciation of art. As an art historian, that is my role. I'm a critic of art as well. And I'm also a writer. My visual art, it's really bad. It is, it's really bad. I don't have the focus that he does, but I'm a writer. So that's how I express my art, through the writing about art.
This is a pretty white stone.
I am very blessed to have probably the best partner in the world, and I mean that in a domestic sense as well as a professional sense. My wife Lena is supportive in everything that I do. She is not only supportive, she is my fallback when I don't have any certainty about the way a sculpture looks. She has an art historian background, she's got an MA in art history, but her eye is completely honest, and if she thinks the eyebrow is crooked, she'll come out, and after I have a hissy fit for 25 minutes, I will come back and say, yes, Lena, you were right, I will change it. She is my absolute rock of Gibraltar. If I had $1 million handed to me tomorrow, actually more than $1 million, I would still do the same thing. I would just do bigger pieces. I wouldn't go cap in hand asking for commissions. I would just buy the biggest hunks of marble I could find, and I would make myself my own Michelangelo David. Once you touch marble, it's very hard, even to go back to other stones. Alabaster I began with, but I would never go back because it doesn't have the same. It doesn't have the same feel. There's a connection to the artistic greatness of the past in marble. Some people wouldn't get it, but it's something that's just deeply ingrained in my soul. And even though I'm covered in dust, like from May until September, and I'm hot, it's in my hair, I have all this dust in my hair and my clothes, I can't touch my face. It's a real joy to work in. It's an absolute privilege to work in.